All right, everyone. My name is Jill Elwood. I am the Nonprofit Programming and Relations Manager here at One Valley Community Foundation, where our mission is to connect people who care to causes that matter to build a better community. So thank you for being here to help us do that. One of the ways we love to do that is by supporting our nonprofit sector. So we are very excited to be bringing back Nonprofit Cafe for the 2021-2022 program year. We hope that you all had a great summer during our summer planning break. Before we dive in, I do want to cover a few housekeeping items and a few updates. First and foremost, due to our programming survey results this summer, Nonprofit Cafe is going to look a little bit different than it has in the past. So years ago, pre-COVID, this used to always be in person. It is now, for the last year and a half, it has been on Zoom, and due to feedback this summer, we are going to do something new. We are going to do a hybrid model this year. So every other month will be on Zoom. Every other month, COVID allowing, will be in person at the Bozeman Public Library. So as you register for Nonprofit Cafe throughout the year, please, please, please double check whether it is a Zoom session or an in-person session. Depending on how this summer plays out and how this fall plays out, we are hopefully going to do every other month in person, but we will let you know if we do transition to having every month on Zoom. The other thing that I want to mention before we get going is a big thank you to our sponsor. This program is only possible because of our sponsors. Our headline sponsor for many, many years has been First Security Bank, and they have continued sponsoring it this year. So thank you to First Security Bank. Our program sponsor this year is Rockford Coffee. So for all of our in-person sessions, they'll be providing refreshments. And of course, today's session sponsor is our amazing speaker, Kari Anderson from Incite Consulting. Not only is she volunteering her time to share her knowledge today, but she is also sponsoring today's session to offset the administrative costs for hosting today's session. So Kari, thank you for all the ways you're supporting today's session. As we get going, if everyone could try to keep themselves on mute unless you are actively speaking, we would greatly appreciate it. There will be some question and answer times. There will be one breakout room near the end. So the mute button, if you need it, is in the bottom left of your Zoom screen. But until we are ready to chat, if we could keep that on mute, we would appreciate it. We are also going to be using our chat box today. So in order to help everyone find it, if you could click on your chat box, it is on the bottom of your screen. There's a button that says chat if you don't have it pulled up. If you could introduce your name and your organization, we would love to see who's in the room today. So again, that is name and organization in the chat box, and I will even paste some instructions in there. Oh, you guys are so quick, you don't even need my instructions. Perfect. And if for some reason your Zoom name does not reflect your actual name, you can rename yourself in the participants section as well. Hi, Susan. Hi, Erica. Bridget's here. Hi, Bridget. Mary Beth, good to see you all. Thank you for joining. Hi, Edward. Oh, it's been forever. You guys, I missed you all over the summer. Welcome back. And now it's time to introduce our awesome speaker today. I am hoping that you all have gotten to hear from Kari in the past or work with Kari because she is amazing. If today is your first time hearing from her, you are in for a treat. She is an incredible nonprofit consultant. I personally have worked with her one-on-one and heard her speak many times. And so when I got to set up this year's roster, she was one of the first people I reached out to, and I'm really excited to bring her to our community. Kari is a Montana native who is now based in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and Jackson, Wyoming. She's a bit of a mobile nonprofit consultant who covers a lot of our region. She brings herself, her toolkit, and her knowledge to nonprofits across our area. She is absolutely amazing. She has been an executive director, a nonprofit staff member, a board chair. So when she comes to this conversation, she has had every perspective of anyone in the room. Not only that, she's super passionate about what she does. I think the only thing that meets her level of expertise is her level of enthusiasm. So we are so grateful to have her here today. And with that, I will turn it over to Kari.
Thanks. Good morning. Good morning. Okay, so quick question. Anyone from Southwest Montana, like Bozeman, Red Lodge, Luther, Rosebud area on the call? You can raise your hand. Anyone? Yoo-hoo! All right, so born and raised in Red Lodge. And when I'm done with you all today, I'm hopping in my car and driving to Red Lodge. We have big weekend plan with some ski racing buddies of myself and I. We can't do everything because of high fire danger, but we're going to the pig races tonight at the Bear Creek Saloon. If anyone wants to join us, come on over. So Kari Anderson, recovering executive director, was a nonprofit executive for a long time. When Jill had reached out and said, hey, what might you want to talk about? I'm like, oh, it's the start of the new school year. And I have not been in school for a long time. I'm not going to tell you how long I haven't been in school, but I always felt when I was working in the sector that when school started, you kind of had a chance to be able to start something fresh again, besides going for cool clothes, right? And I always committed to myself something that I was going to do differently with my board, or differently with my staff when I was in the field. So my sincere hope for everyone that's on the call today is that we look at this as, hey, it is a chance wherever you are in your fiscal year to be able to look objectively as to what your role is with your organization, who you kind of have sitting around the board table right now with you, and what you could commit to doing differently to strengthen your organization, especially since last time I checked, some of us are a little tired. We've had these peaks and valleys the last 15 to 18 months in terms of what we can or what we can't do, or what we should or what we shouldn't do. And I think giving folks some clarity and some grace as to what our roles are together as we move forward is certainly going to help us as we move through the fall and winter. But a quick question before we start, and I don't need you all to come off of mute yet, though we're going to practice that. This is the first question for everyone. What's the superpower that you have in your leadership role at your organization? And I'd love to see this in the chat. I will share mine with you in a second. So what is the thing that you are known for or you are proud of? Mine is, I love difficult conversations. That is the cape that I wear. I love those things. So tell me, what do you got? What's your superpower? And if you must blurt it out and you must say it verbally, I'm good with that. I'd love to hear morning voices. Ooh, enthusiasm, ops. Marielle, I need to find you. I need you for lots of nonprofits. We need an operations person. Ooh, relationships. Thank you, Jim. Problem solver. Need lots of those. Ooh, Danica, thank you. Authentic relationships. Listener. Thank you, Bridget. I also need to clone you. Decisiveness. Excellent. Tough to, decisions. Hey, Mary Beth, good morning. Strategic planning. Oh, combined with financial resources. Excellent, right? So I asked this question at the beginning of this because it is really easy for those of us in leadership positions in times of crisis or in times of strife, perchance, with someone on your leadership team, we forget about our superpowers, right? We forget that we are in the business of dealing with people, and we focus on things that aren't going well instead of the things that perhaps we have in our deck of cards that we can deal with. Bless you, Francesca, laughing. Laughing's a good one right now, right? So I would encourage all of you to do a superpower check around your team and around your board, because a little later on in our conversation today, I'm going to be asking you to talk about what skills are currently around your table and how we can make sure that we are actually fostering those and fertilizing them so that the board and the ED relationship can be that much stronger. So thanks for playing with that this morning. So a couple pieces, this is a hand exercise. I don't know, I still am horrible at the emoji hand in Zoom. This probably alludes to my age, I'm not exactly sure. So you can either play like this, right? Or you can play with a little hand in the Zoom thing. I would like a show of hands as to whom here is the executive director. So show of hands if you're an exec on the call today. Hey, hand. Excellent. Okay, thank you, execs. Glad you're here this morning. Okay, so you can take those hands down. Now, if you are a board member or board chair, please raise your hand. Da, 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 da. Excellent. Okay, good. So we almost have like, it looks like 2/3, 1/3, might be even halvesies. That's great, right? So I've worked really hard to make sure that there are examples for each of you today in terms of things that the board or the board chair could work on, things that an executive director can work on. I'm going to work really hard in inclusive language, but you can call me out if somehow you're like, wait a minute, it doesn't feel like that resonates with me. I promise it should, right? So as we get going today, I want you to think about a couple of things. your relationship status, and where are you at with that? So here are some questions for you, and a couple of statements. So I'm hoping that you have heard this before, that the most important relationship in your nonprofit is the relationship that exists between the executive director and the board, and in particular, the executive director and the board chair. When that relationship is on track, and I can think viscerally when I was in the field, when things were humming and they were really, really healthy, it's so easy to do our work. It is so easy to deliver on mission. It is a gas to go to work. It is great to go to a board meeting. Your mission's fulfilled and the organization sings, right? For lack of a better word. When things are not on track, and I can think viscerally to when that was not the case for me, I caused part of it, right? As the executive director, a couple of you on the call have heard my horror stories before in terms of what I did to the board, what I did to the board, what I didn't do. When things are off track, there's so much energy and time that is put towards fixing the relationship and not getting to the business of mission. That's exhausting, right? And worst case scenario, people start to leave, right? Whether that's you as the executive director being asked to leave, that was close for me once, or you start to see board members just ghost, right? So I'd like you to do some thinking about, you don't have to ask, you don't have to answer. I want you to think about where you're at right now, because that will help with some of the assessment questions that I'm going to ask you to consider in a little while. So a couple pieces with regard to a status check, right? So I've got some questions I'd like you to consider. So think back over the last 2 years. I actually saw someone say, this has been going on for 36 months. I'm like, well, it might feel like it, but we've only been in COVID and that economic crisis, depending on who you're talking to, from January 2022, maybe March to start, right? But I want you to think back, 2020, 2021. Here's some scenarios for you, and you guys can do show of hands if you want. Have you ever left a board meeting wondering what just happened? Maybe you had an email exchange with your board chair prior to the meeting, and you thought you were on the same page about whatever it is, new initiative, budget, some time off for you. Can I get an amen, right? Some time off for you. And in the meeting, it was so clear that whatever communication you had tried, that was not heard. And you left feeling like you're on a desert island. Anyone had that happen before? I have. Or have you experienced communication challenges over the last 18 months with the board or with your executive director? Remember, folks, we are not infallible here as EDs, right? Ooh, boy. Possibly these communication challenges at the beginning of COVID were because of tech issues. We hadn't yet really figured out what it meant to have Zoom really for everyone, or a really decent conference line for folks to call in on. Or it could be because we haven't talked about what you prefer, email, text, phone call, and the communication is just, anyone have that over the last 18 months? I have. Right. If you haven't, you're perfect. I need to find you. You're a unicorn and I must add you right to my herd. Anyone experience this? Board members or leadership less engaged because of the pandemic, right? Yeah. And so folks, let's give those board members, we're going to give you a hot pause for 2 minutes. I recognize that you all are volunteers. I recognize that you have a myriad of other things that you do in your communities, whether that is taking care of family, homeschooling, trying to figure out how to work at home yourself, right? Taking care of your staff. And you still chose to be on board, right? So there's been a lessened engagement by board members because of all those things, or perhaps other. There's been a lessened engagement by staff because of also those things, though they are paid, right? It was rough last March and April and May trying to figure out, because again, we thought this was going to be 6 weeks long, right? We were trying to figure out homeschooling and, oh my heavens, rural internet bandwidth in Harrison, Idaho, right? Or whatever that was. There was a lessened engagement because of anxiety, right? And a little panic and stress. So we had some less than ideal board engagements and board meetings. This isn't other thing for you to consider. Change in leadership on the board. Maybe it's because you're actually adhering to terms and term limits. Hurrah! Maybe it's because someone had to resign because of a health issue. Was there a change in leadership at your organization from the executive director? Like, all of those things cause relational imbalances. Anyone go through a staffing change last year in the ED position? Anyone? That's a thing, right? So those 4 questions are somewhat indicative of, oh, well, where are we at, right, with these pieces? So I'd like you to share with me, and this is a great opportunity to come off mute. Not everyone has to share right now, but if you've got these things, I'd love you to consider them. I'd love for you to share 3 things that you need most from your board chair. So execs, you get to go first. Anyone feeling brave this morning? And if you're not feeling brave verbally, you can put it in the chat. What are 3 things that you need from your board? Anyone feel like blurting? I'll call on someone in a second. Hey, Mary Beth, because I know you, tell me, what do you need from your board?
I think shared vision and some probably like commitment to policy, because I'm in a new position. And I think just a lot of communication about pacing.
That's great. I appreciate that. Hey, Bridget, I'm going to stick you on the spot because you're here, and I'm so happy you're here. Thank you. What are 3 things that you need from your board at One Valley?
Yeah, my board or my board chair?
Well, you can pick either.
Yeah, either one. I would say I'll just say my board chair, maybe.
Sure.
I need her time. I need her accessibility and time. I need her support on helping me think through puzzles. Sometimes she's like the only other person that I can puzzle through things with. And then I think similarly to Mary Beth, somebody that really does share my vision for where I want to take the organization. I was articulating the other day to our team that it does feel like I run 2 organizations. I run the One Valley, program staff, and then I run our board of directors. Not run them, but like help facilitate that support. And sometimes it feels like 2 different organizations that require different things, that require different needs. So I would say just support on organization number 2.
Right. No, that's great. I appreciate that. And thanks for those of you that are chiming in the chat. So a couple pieces that I love all of them. Drury, thank you. Participation, supportive vision, shared communication, thought partnership, responsiveness, support, mutual respect, clear communication, support. Right, that's great. I love it. There's so many things, right? So let's switch. Hey, board chairs or board directors who are on the comm, I would love to hear from you. What do you need? What are the 3 things you need from your executive director in order for you to do efficient and engaged work as a volunteer? Anyone want to verbalize, or you're welcome to pop in the chat? Because this is a 2-way street, right? Like, I called it a dance for a reason. This is the partners in the dance card. So I'm going to watch the chat, but I would love to hear from a board chair or board member.
Todd Falstrom.
Hi, Todd.
The big thing is we have a complicated board system, but roles and responsibilities and communication probably is the top biggies, trying to figure out how to move forward. And so that's the challenging piece.
Sure. I appreciate you sharing. Any other board members or board chair like to share what they need from their EDs? I have a list. I remember when my board chair told me this, so I'm happy to help if that's helpful, but I would love to hear from another board member or board chair. And if not, if you're shy or haven't been caffeinated yet, ooh, clear communications and expectations. Thank you, Mariel. Appreciate that. Right. It's a 2-way street. So as you're maybe thinking, I've got a couple other, comments to share and I guess food for thought for you. So I think the big question is, how many of you have actually sat down with your partner and asked them this question? Right. So I would encourage you, and I'm going to guess what you all just shared. They're not guesses. Like if you verbalized it or if you put it in the chat, those are real things. So my homework for you is this, and it might be 1 homework assignment or 2. If you haven't sat down, executive director, with your board chair and ask them this, well, let's do that. Last time I checked, we're not in the business of reading minds, right? That's usually a bad exercise anyway, because we're usually wrong, right? So let's do that. And two, if you have done that, well, are you actually doing those things, right? If your board chair has told you what they need, are you actually delivering those things? If your executive director has told you what they need, are you actually doing this? So thanks, Paul, for being so honest, right? I haven't done this intentionally. Something that I learned, and oh boy, I so wish that I would have been this smart, right? When I was actually working in the field, being explicit, right? Clarity. All of us just want to know what it is that we should be doing in order for us to be successful, right? So let's be clear about what it is. And I would absolutely champion being intentional about what do you need to be successful? And then the follow-up question is, so how would that manifest, right? What does that look like to you? Because I understand, and Bridget, bless you for being so honest about, yeah, it feels like I'm running two joints, right? Like that's a lot of work. And so the more clear we can be about expectations and what it looks like to be successful, we all rise, right? So a couple other things for you to think about as we really get going with this. I would love you to think about, and if you don't have it now, again, I'm going to add homework. Everyone's going to say, why do you have Kari here for the first one? I didn't want homework right away as we started off the cafe series. So I want you to think about what are key characteristics of a great board and ED partnership. Some of them you've listed, right? Because those are needs that you are desiring from your partner, whether it's the volunteer partner or the staff partner. But I want you to think about what key characteristics would be. And I think those would be really important to share at an upcoming board meeting or a board retreat. Those are big deals. So as we think about, right, the dance, right? It's the Texas two-step or whatever we want to call it in Montana, right? There is a relational importance that is just so critical as we talk about how we navigate this business together. I'm not in the business of reading to all of you, so I'm hoping you can see my screen and you can read that, but I want to share a little more about why this statement is so important to me. So the relationship between the executive director and the board chair is incredibly important. As I've said on the screen, it sets the tone, right, for relationships throughout the organization. We know when this is strong, and I'm so hoping that each of you have experienced this at least once during your tenure as a leadership volunteer or in your tenure as an executive director. We know that when it is strong, meetings are enjoyable and invigorating. We know that staff members, if we're lucky enough to have them, right? Because some of us are small and mighty and we don't have staff. Staff members, volunteers, community partners can see the strength of the overall organizational team, right? Because the board and the staff are an organizational team. Staff and fellow board members model interactions and behavior according to what they see you do. Think about that for a second, right? So you as the board chair and you as the executive director and you as board members, others involved in your organization are going to model what they see you do. It's not unlike preschool, right? So they're going to model really crummy behavior if we're allowing that to happen, right? Around your one-on-ones or the board table. This relationship, right? And your adherence to really taking care in building this relationships actually helps your entire organizational culture. And ideally, that's built on respect, ongoing communication, and partnership. Those are like kind of the big three for me. Respect, communication, ongoing partnerships. And you can actually see growth, goal achievement, and mission moments every time there's an interaction. Cooking with gas, right? That's great stuff. And if we flip it, and again, I've been there because I helped a great part of this. And I also had some board folks that probably shouldn't have been on the board because they weren't engaged with mission, right? So that we fell off the tracks a little. Pick the thing, right? So pick a word. If any of you, I'm hoping it's few, but if any of you have been involved in a less than ideal board chair, executive relationship, pick one word that describes the ickiness of it. You can put it in the chat. One word. I have so many. I'm not going to take them all because I don't want you to say ditto. So if you have, I'm hoping you haven't, right? But if you have, what's one word that would describe the feeling that you had when things weren't going well? Fraud, exhausting. True that, right? Pride. Yeah, that's a toughie. Trust. Yep. Yep. I had a board chair at an unnamed organization in Denver, Colorado, tell me in my first 30 days on the job that as a woman, I shouldn't have the job. I was too young to have the job. I was 32. And he was going to make it his mission to run me out of Denver. Welcome. Super fun, right? Like that's a good time. So that was a lot of my words. Friction, disappointing, right? Lack of trust. Right. So we don't want that, right? I mean, ultimately, it's exhausting, absolutely exhausting. We don't want that for volunteers. I mean, how many of you have felt a struggle at some point in time, whether you're on the board chair, or executive director, to recruit more board members? Anyone had that struggle before? Right? Only 2 of us? 3. Okay. All the rest of you, your coffee's not working. Okay. So can you imagine the word gets out, right? In Bozeman or in Belgrade or in Whitefish or in Great Falls or in Havre or wherever, that board is rotten, right? Like people, we already have sometimes a struggle getting folks to come on board because there's stuff to do. But if we're not maintaining that relationship, right? People, it's in the water. They know. We don't want that for you. What we do want is you to be gutsy. So let me talk about this for a second. So it is so easy. I've done it, right? It is so easy just to say, this is someone else's fault. This is the board chair's responsibility. This is the board, they should know better. That's the executive director, right? They're supposed to be managing us. No, it's easy to say this, but what I'm going to encourage you, all of you this fall, right? As we start school again, if you will, is to be gutsy. And this is what I mean. It's so easy for us all to point fingers. I know you all are much more mature than I am, and would never dream of passing blame on anyone else at your organization. But I would encourage you, if you've had this challenge before, to think about, so why does that challenge exist? If this is working well, what's the secret sauce, and how do we continue to have that in our organization? What role do I play in making this relationship better? Whether I'm the board chair, whether I'm the exec, whether I'm a board member. I want to encourage you through this session and moving forward that you just take an honest assessment of the relationship that you have, whatever role you're playing, right? Exec, board chair, board relationship, and or board member. And certainly over the last 18 months, there has been a heightened spotlight, I think, on all of us and how this role waxes and wanes depending on bandwidth and depending on availability. But what I absolutely know is essential is all of your willingness to be present. Doesn't mean you have to do everything, right? But if we're really committed to this relationship, it's the willingness to be present so that you can actually change the narrative at your organization. So I want to share, and there's going to be some time to chat, and there's actually going to be a poll coming up here pretty quick. I want to share some examples of dysfunctional boards first, and then we're going to move to things that we can all do to change. Maybe there's only one piece of something that's not working, or there's 10 pieces that are, and how we can actually duplicate those and continue on. So these are the 3. And if you have another that you want to share with me, please verbalize it or put it in the chat. These are the 3 that we typically see when things are not quite right with the organization. And there's so many reasons why they're maybe not right. What matters is that we address what it is so that we can get to a solution and we can get to that singing board, right? So when we think about what a rubber stamp board means to us, and this actually comes from a study from the University of Maryland, a professor by the name of Alex Counts. So a rubber stamp board it's the yes board, right? They approve whatever the executive director wants. Folks, that's actually not very healthy, right? And as a former ED, it was certainly easier when that would happen, but it actually means that there's a discharge of fiduciary responsibilities. If the board is just saying yes all the time without digging into the issue and really vetting it to make sure that it's okay in terms of risk management proposition. When the board fails to thoroughly examine decisions by asking challenging questions, it creates unhealthy risk. So as easy executive directors as it would be, right? For everyone to say yes all the time, we actually want to encourage healthy discourse at your board meetings. And healthy discourse comes when you've created a culture of respect and trust, right? Second dysfunctional board is the micro board. And I just have to see my executive directors for a second. Remember, people, we are in a space of trust, right? Anyone felt micromanaged before? Oh, you guys are all shy because your board members are on, right? It's okay. I have, yes, so I have, right? But you know, where some of this micro happened, and board members, tell me if I'm right on this, oftentimes board members or the board chair will micromanage because of two things. We haven't been clear as to what Todd had mentioned earlier, clarity of roles and expectations, right? So I don't think any board member or board chair sets out to be micromanaging. They don't know what their job is, right? Or, hello again, my fault. We as the executive director aren't providing effective and consistent communication as to what's going on, right? And so then that little micromanage starts to happen. And it's not fun, right? For anyone. I don't know of a lot of folks that actually enjoy micromanaging. So if that micromanaging isn't curtailed, then the board starts to get into the weeds of the organization. And that's not their job, right? That's your job as the ED and your staff's job. So we don't want to micromanage. It's no fun for anyone. And then what we call a balkanized board. And no, we've not just taken a trip to Central Europe. That's not what we're talking about here. It is that the board is fixated for whatever reason on a particular issue or focus. Usually that looks like a program or an area of operation. And that creates some friction and challenges, right? Because the organization is not just one thing. And in program or ops work, that's the purview of staff. So we need to help, right, with education to be able to get that dysfunction to stop. And we can diagnose those three kinds of dysfunction by this little diagnostic tool. So this is what there are questions to ask. And I know that Jill did this last year. I should remind everyone, since you've had a summer off, you're going to get my slide deck. So you've got this to be able to take a peek at, and you got my notes in it as well. So you can ask these questions amongst your one-on-one meetings or your board meetings. So a quiz, right, in terms of symptoms. Board members are disengaged. What does that look like? Well, okay, there's harvest that happens. I know of a lot of boards that don't meet in August, right? Because it's harvest time. Meeting attendance is down. Members don't return phone calls, emails, or texts. They don't attend events. Right? That's a sign or symptom. Perhaps we need to be working on this relationship. As an executive director, an unhealthy relationship can sometimes be diagnosed by the fact you are nervous about bringing challenging issues to the board because of fear of fill in the blank. Could be the conversation my board chair had with me. Could be that perhaps you've been treated disrespectfully at a board meeting. Could be because your ideas are shot down, right? But we don't want there to be a fear of anyone bringing a challenging issue to the board. Perhaps an issue that's happening right now is board meetings are becoming less productive. Decisions aren't being made at meetings, right? We meet to meet, but we don't actually have a consensus or an action item or a directive, right? Those meetings aren't very fun. Lots of talk, right? Lots of ideation, but no concrete action. That could potentially wander into an unhealthy territory. As the executive director, okay, quick quiz, EDs, get ready, hands. You don't have a regularly scheduled one-on-one with your chair. So quick show of hands. Notice I'm not defining what regular is. Do you have a regular check-in with your board chair? Please raise your hand. If I had prizes to send you, I would send them to you right now. So pretend that I'm sending a virtual carrier pigeon to you with a prize. Excellent, right? If you don't, this is going to be a homework piece, right? That's a really important thing for you to have. I'll tell you why in a little bit. Another sign and symptom that things perhaps aren't as healthy at the ranch as they could be. One person is designing your board agenda. That is actually a multi-purpose conversation in order for you to have a really good board meeting. Ideally, that board agenda is being designed by the board chair and executive director. And sometimes if you are a newer exec or the organization is in transition, it's actually being decided by the executive committee and the board chair and the executive director, right? Because they're bringing the exec along. If that agenda is designed by one person, that's a silo, right? That's not super helpful for the organization. I had mentioned this earlier, right? Another sign and symptom that perhaps the board ED, board chair relationship could be strengthened is you leave your board meetings, and this could be you, this could be a board member saying, what did we just meet for? That was a colossal waste of time, right? We didn't move any sort of a mountain. Those are just some of the warning signs, but we've got solutions, right, for you to consider as you are thinking about, so what might be one thing or two things that could be strengthened or need to be blown up, right, and fixed at your organization. So I've got my first poll. Jill, are you ready? Yes. Okay, good. So I've got a poll for y'all to take. And the first poll is it live? I'm not paying attention, Jill. There we go. Everyone, take the poll, please. And as you're taking the poll, I've got a quick, we're going to dive into, so how do we get this relationship to be stronger, right? So I want you to commit to building the relationship. I'm hoping that seems obvious, but it starts with this, right? You, in whatever role you're playing, your role, if you're committing to building this relationship, is building trust. How do we do that? We follow up after meetings in a timely manner. You call when you say you're going to call. You respond promptly to emails and messages from board members or from your executive director, board members, board chair. Be honest about what you don't know. I've been doing this for a long time, almost 30 years, right? In some capacity for a nonprofit. And I still do not know everything that I should know. And that's okay. So be honest about what you don't know and reassure whomever it is, the ED, the board member, the board chair, that you're going to find out the answer. Be respectful of time of your leadership volunteers. Follow the agenda, start and stop your meetings on time. You may need to adjust the content of the meeting in order to adhere to some time management, and that's okay. Part of this committing to building relationship is communicating effectively. We mentioned it earlier. What did they need from you as a leader? What do they need from the board chair? Know when it's time to pick up the phone rather than send an email or a text, right? If we're building relationships, sometimes we need to have a phone call or a face-to-face visit to make sure that there's not ambiguity in terms of the message. And I had mentioned it earlier, right? And I will mention it again. I want to make sure that you're meeting regularly with your board chair. It's one of the reasons that you can actually help to move your organization forward, is if you've got that dedicated time. And Bridget had called it out earlier, right? The importance of having time with your highest level leadership volunteer. We don't get time back, and our job is to manage that time efficiently, but we desperately need time with our board chairs. So Jill, can I ask you for the poll results? Can you tell us?
Absolutely. Sorry, it took me a second to
Oh, it's
unmute.
okay. There's so many. I know.
Interestingly, 46% said other. That was the number one choice.
Other.
Not sure if other meant more or less.
What other means?
Second highest choice, 25% said weekly, 17% said monthly, and then 13% said bi-weekly. Oh, look, there's a button that says share results. You guys, I'm new at doing polls. Thank you for
Hey, we're all learning together.
now you get to see it.
Okay. Good. Excellent. Okay. So, I mean, again, I'm not gonna tell you what I think you should do, but if you don't have regularly defined, I think that'd be a great conversation to start, right? What does regular mean to you? Sometimes that's going to be based on where you are in life cycle at your organization and where you are in terms of how long you've been the ED, right? And my other little nugget is, please don't lie by omission. And what I mean by that is, when someone is coming into the leadership role at your board, they got to know that this is a thing. They have to know that time with you as the executive director is an expectation, and why it is so critically important for their success and for your success, right? So please don't lie by omission. Okay, a couple other little tips for you. So Your job, executive director, is to set the board up for success. Board members, did you hear that? That's our job, right? As the ED. So what does that look like? We need to provide you with tools. So sharing information, tools, resources that allow you to make informed strategic decisions. That is our job as the executive director. And we need to share all the news, even if it's not good news. Because again, you're our risk managers, right? So we have to share that information for you. That helps to build trust, accountability, and it demonstrates transparency. So here's the thing, execs, this is where I'm not going to make you very happy. And I'm sorry about that, but it is a Friday, right? So you get to leave after this. If you are only showing program and operational updates with your board, guess where they think they have to pay attention? Program and operations. That's not their role, right? So they're going to focus on things that are most important to you. Let's focus them on the things they're supposed to be focused on. Risk management, strategy, fiduciary, supporting you, right? Doesn't mean you're withholding other information. It means you are focusing on the things that they need to do in a governance perspective for the organization. So I'm hoping that makes sense. Another little tip, it's time for a chat, right? Just in case rigor mortis is set into your fingers, it's time for you to chat. I want you to acknowledge your own strengths and opportunity to grow. You as a board member, you as a board chair, you as an executive director, and oftentimes that growth piece happens through the annual board retreat. Folks, that's the best practice for nonprofits, right? And there's a lot of folks that say, peace out, we're not having a retreat this year. Everything's great. That's not a thing. That's not a thing, right? You have a retreat to celebrate. You have a retreat to educate. You have a retreat to plan. Every year, the content and the meat of that retreat is going to be different, but you can't handle those things in a 1.5 hour board meeting, right? That is a longer time together. So chat time, when was the last time you had your board retreat? This year? Pre-COVID? Pre your tenure as an executive director? Hey folks, guess what? Retreats happen on Zoom. I counted last year, I did 47 via Zoom because of the importance of planning and celebrating and building culture, right? It's a thing. You don't get to take a pass when there's a crisis. Oh, good. I'm seeing there's still retreats happening. Marielle, good job. Starting the practice May of this year, last September, 1 September, pre-COVID. Happens. Retreats via Zoom, you can do it, right? I mean, I'd love nothing better than to be able to have, breaking bread with people in the room, but the executive director still has to have support, right? And so the retreat piece is important. Good job, Paul. I'm excited that there's one coming in January for you guys. All right. Okay, a couple more things to consider. I want you to be thinking about getting outside help. I will, and this isn't just me, this is not a blatant plug, right, for Kari the consultant. This is hey, as we are looking at how we get our work done in our organization, oftentimes it's not prudent to hire a full-time staff person, right? It's a contractor or it's a consultant. Perhaps, I think in particular of some finance committees that I've worked with on boards, it has been a struggle to find finance committee members or a treasurer because folks think they need to have come out of the womb understanding nonprofit finances in order to sit on that committee. That's not the case. We bring in outside help with our bookkeeper or a CPA to help that group understand more about your finances. They can help you lead the 990 conversation, right? They can help make sense of your P&L and your balance sheet. So I would encourage you to figure out with your board and your board chair, where are those gaps and how do we bring tools in to support the board, right? From a board perspective, hey, where does your ED have gaps? And where can we bring in outside help, right? The dread outside help to help, right? Because oftentimes it's not a staffing piece and oftentimes it's not a skill set that's on the board. Bringing in outside help is okay. And if I would say there is a silver lining with COVID, there has been, I think, a much more of a recognizing that outside help is okay, right? To be able to utilize. The regular self-assessment from the board. A quick show of hands. Do we do an annual self-assessment for the board? Please raise your hand if you do. I love the pink sweater and the dark hair. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I've got one. Hey, Todd, do you guys do one? You can either say yes or no.
No.
No. Okay, good. So this is a big deal, right? Executive directors get reviews every year. The board should too. And this isn't a, hey, board, we're going to best your chops, right? This is a, how are we doing? Look at what all we've done. Look how we've grown. We've done this with governance. We've done this with fund development. We have a capital campaign plan. This isn't to say where you're rotten. And why do we think that anyway, right? Why is that a thing? This is about how are we doing and where could we grow, right? Jill, if you wouldn't mind some homework for me, I have a template that I'm happy to send to everyone. I'll send it to you. You can get it to everyone. It is so easy to do. And it is so important for the board to be able to reflect, say, how did we do this year? And how did I do? Where are we strong? Where could I use some opportunities for growth? Because that helps to inform some of the board education that happens via the governance committee that also happens to help you plan your board retreat, right? So it's great intel from the field, if you will. Board talents. Okay, so execs, this is on you. When was the last time that you actually sat down with individual board members to talk about their passion and skill sets? How would you know if you don't ask? So anyone here actually have that conversation? Let's just say with a new board member in the last 6 months. Anyone? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, you make me happy. Right? How do you know if you don't ask? Love it, Susan. Thank you. It's part of the onboarding of new board members. So let's take a cue, right, from Susan. How would you know if you don't ask? And ideally, right, as you're interviewing board members, you would be talking about what skill set they can bring to the board. But we don't just want that to be part of the interview and the board matrix. If they've called that skill out and have said, this is where I can add value to your organization, folks, it's our job, right, as the executive director to make sure that skill is being used. Otherwise, we're squandering talent and that leads to board disengagement. So that's on us, right, as executive directors to make sure that we're actually utilizing that. I know this next piece has been problematic at best during COVID. I long for the days, right, where I got to go out and sit with board members and actually engage with them personally. No, that does not mean you're going on vacation with them. It's a conflict of interest. We don't like that, right? That's a little too cozy. I'm talking about going to coffee, getting a beer with them, right? Going on a skate ski, going on a horse ride, taking a walk around the neighborhood, whatever that is, whatever we can do to build rapport. If you think about one of the primary roles of a board member in terms of connecting you with their network and being an ambassador for the organization, they have to know, like, and trust you as an executive director. And so how does that happen? We're out with them. I know that's been challenging with COVID, and I would encourage all of you, board chair, board directors, executive director, to figure out if that hasn't been happening in your organization, how can we make that happen? And this is where I'm going to make my executive directors very unhappy with me again, twice in an hour. I actually had this written in my performance standards when I was an executive director. One of my core competencies as an executive director was board support. And that was alluding, Bridget had mentioned that's part of our job, right? Is we support the board. Well, part of that was measured by how many one-on-ones did I have with board meetings or with individual board members? Because you can measure it, right? That's a big deal. And then you can actually see how board engagement rises up when you've had a chance to do that. A couple other pieces as we get ready to go into breakout rooms for you guys to chat about some things. I always like to see boards using their agendas strategically, and that certainly helps if you are using a consent agenda. So this is a great opportunity for you to share in the chat. If you don't use a consent agenda or don't know what a consent agenda is, let's put that in the chat, because I am happy to send a template to Jill. Jill, can you make a note? that I need to send a consent agenda topic or a template for you. Short version, right? Board members, this is your chance to raise your hand. Do you enjoy going to a board meeting where it is a regurgitation of reports that were sent to you via email? Show of hands if you enjoy that, or you can do it a big, right? Like that's rotten. I'm seeing Mary Beth laughing at me because it's rotten. I want you to use a consent agenda so that you have space in your board meeting to talk about 2 or 3 really meaty items. If I'm a board member, I'm showing up there, right? If we're talking about a deficit of $50,000, I'm showing up. I want to figure out how that happened and how we get out of it. If we're thinking about merging with another organization, if we received a windfall of $150,000 from a planned gift that was unexpected, what are we going to do, right, with those funds? I don't, as much as I love all of you executive directors, I don't want to hear you read your report to me. But that's part of our job with board engagement, right? That's part of the Texas two-step. We need to create a strategic agenda so that all of our board members actually are expected and want to verbally participate in that board meeting. That's our job. Okay. A couple other pieces. I want you to set metrics and goals that can be measured and tracked from a board level down, right? So some of this comes out of strategic planning. Some of this comes out of committee work plans. Some of this comes out of your executive director performance reviews. But if we think about, right, how this relationship works, Todd had alluded to it earlier. It certainly was alluded to in the chat. We need to have clear expectations. People want to know how they can be successful. And so we can't just say, well, we want more money. We have to be explicit about what that looks like. We want more people involved in program. Well, we have to be explicit about what that looks like. We want more board members. How about this instead? We have a goal of 15 board members, and we would like to have 3 recruited, onboarded, and mentored by December 31st, 2021. That's measurable, right? So that helps board members actually be accountable and show up. It also helps your executive director. Last piece, and I think 3/4 of you handled this during COVID, but there's still some folks that need to handle it. We need you to examine your systems. And I'll give you just an example of a group that I'm working with in Spokane right now. This organization has been around for 60 years. 60 years. And they still do not have great comm systems in their organization. They have been so focused on delivering program and operations that they don't have, they still don't have, as of last board meeting, not all board members understand how to get on Zoom. They literally did not have board meetings during COVID. And they are having to make a decision at their September 21st board meeting whether they are dissolving the business. Because the thing is like, I'm not going to sing you the AC/DC song Shot Down in Flames right now, though I could at karaoke this evening, but I'm not going to. It is a mess right now because they did not invest in technology. As Delta continues on, not a fun topic to talk about right now, but we know we're going to be meeting less in person. And so the importance of these tech pieces to engage everyone in your organization so that they have a seat at the table to assist you is just really important. On whether that's a comm piece, whether that's finance, whether that is a donor database, that's everyone's role, right? To make sure that those relationships are tight. So we're going to get ready to go into breakout rooms. And the piece that I want you to be thinking about and discuss, and this is the only one question, and we're not separating you board versus executive director, right? You guys are going to be combined in a hodgepodge on this Friday. I want you to think about what is the one thing you can do to improve your relationship with X, right? So if you're the executive director, is it a board chair piece or is it a board member piece? If you're the board chair or a board member, I want you to think about what's the one piece you can do right now, right, to make an improvement in that relationship as you are starting school again this fall. And Jill and I talked about this before. I really want there to be both entities in rooms because I think it's really important that executive directors hear from a variety of board members, whether they're on your team or not, right, and vice versa. And it is right now 9:56, so we're going to do that for about 10 minutes. I'm going to pop in and out because I want a chance that all of you have a chance to be heard. And then we're going to come back and do a little sharing. And I have one last piece of homework for you. So Jill, can you release the hounds, please? Hey, everyone, welcome back. And I know some of you had finished conversations and others, you were knee deep in them. One of the things that I sincerely hope that happens during Cafe Series or conference is that if you have found someone that you've connected with because you've got a similar issue, whether it's, oh my heavens, we are doing this well, and I want to continue to do this, or oh my heavens, they're having this challenge, and I've got a team member and a mentor to be able to talk with, please make sure you guys get each other's contact information in the chat, because what I know to be true, and no one's told me differently yet, is that this sector is one of the best possible places you can work for. Love what we do, and one of the best possible places you can volunteer. And it is also sometimes the loneliest, because you don't have someone else to talk with, right? Whether it's because towns are small, you're not supposed to be talking outside of board meetings about the board meeting, right? Like there's just stuff. So if you can find someone that has either similar mission, similar personality, similar thing that's going on, to have them be a sounding board, it's really, really important. So please do continue those conversations. As we transition to, it's about time, right, for leaving some space for Q&A for all of you. I wanted to leave you with a couple of additional thoughts as we get ready to go back to school, if you will, right? And that is, I want you to be thinking about how you move forward and these three pieces. And those are, and I will read them because they're very, very important to me. Relationships matter. Several of you have called out, we want clarity in terms of roles. So explicit versus implicit or tacit, and the commitment to doing small things, right, towards larger goals. A strong relationship between all of you who are executive directors and all of you who are board members takes work, right? So tiny pieces for big pieces. And it's essential to the longevity and success of your organization. I would ascertain, and though I'm sure some organizations would say, by heavens, fundraising is the most important thing, I would actually say that this relationship is the most important thing for this organization, because without this, you can't do the other things, right? You can't raise money effectively. You don't have the resources to be able to hire staff. You can't do program delivery. It's this relationship that is the most important. And it's so important for all of us to be honest about where we're currently at. I've heard stories in the breakout rooms of great successes that are happening. And I've also heard stories that are very typical, right, of what happens in transition, or what happens when there's a founder involved, or what happens when there's muddy in terms of whose role is what. So being honest first is super important. And that there's practical and tangible ways that you can strengthen the relationship. One of the pieces that I had asked Jill to be able to share with all of you, and we actually haven't done it because we don't have time, but I want her to send it to all of you. Jill, we're making a pivot right on our agenda. I have a partner assessment that I'd like her to be able to send all of you as a part of your homework. And it's a 2-page Word document, and it just really gives you, I think it's 5 or 6 categories for you in your role, right? Whether you're the executive director, whether you are the board chair, whether you're a board member, you can assess, so where am I at with this? And it gives you kind of a benchmark. So if you took it today and said, it's August 27th, where am I at right now? And then you can revisit it, like next at the end of 3rd quarter, at the end of 4th quarter, maybe at your review or at the board assessment this next year. What does that look like for you? And are we moving the needle on any additional pieces? So that's my last piece before we start to go into Q&A. And I am also going to come off of screen share right now so that I can see all of your faces. So I'd love to make sure before we sign off today, if there's questions from folks that I can answer, I'm happy to do that right now. And you can put it in the chat, or if you want to come off mute and say, hey, I'm having this thing, what can I do? So I'm happy to do that. And I'm also going to stick a couple links in the chat while I'm waiting for questions. So anyone, this is your time. Okay, while you're
Kari.
thinking, oh yeah, go ahead.
What I really appreciated in working with you in the past is that you've been really rich with tools, and that I feel like really helps to neutralize some discussions. And one of the things that I was wondering if you had in your bag of tricks was maybe like a timeline or arc of when an executive director comes on, like what's kind of a normal rhythm for some of these, the transfer of not just responsibility, but authority too, so that you know, people just feel a little bit safer in that transition.
That's a great question. So my commitment to you, Jill, help me with this, is I will hunt in my bag of tricks whether I actually have something. But what I will tell you is, so when executive directors are hired, that's your job, right? Like board members aren't doing your job for you anymore. That's your job. Board members need to focus on their job. Certainly part of transition, I think about like 30, 60, 90, like, you know, first year, it's important for the board to be able to help you with some transitional work. And so I think about the role that you and Francesca play, right, as co-directors. So in order for you all to be successful, it's, hey, these are the things that we want to see from you as an executive director your first year. So it's not the board doing the work for you, it's them helping you be a little more hyper-focused in terms of this is what a success would look like this first year, right? Because I think anyone who's sitting around here right now, it takes a year in your role as an executive director to get your feet under you, to be able to really feel like you've gone through all the cycle, right, of what goes on in your organization, when program works, when budget happens, when board retreat is. I think I have a couple pieces that I'm happy to share about what's typical in terms of 30, 60, 90 day in a year. I'll dig for those, and I'll make sure to get with Jill. And I see a hand up from Drury. Hey, Drury, what can I answer for you? And then we'll go to Jenna.
Thanks so much, Kari.
Sure.
In terms of time management efficacy with my board, I do a weekly summary at the end of the week to just sort of say, this is what's happened, this is what's happening, to keep them in the loop. And then before our agendas, or before our board meetings, I do an agenda with my president and secretary, just to let people know what they need to read beforehand, what's going to come up. So as you say, we don't spend the entire meeting rehashing. We've had a bit of a problem with our board reading any of that content before the meeting. And so our time management is not used well. We get there and we say, okay, we want to vote on the minutes. We want to go over this and discuss this. Has everyone reviewed this? And one hand will go up. And this is happening every time. So I don't know if you have a sort of ingenious or effective or creative way other than sending the material in enough time beforehand to get people to actually review it. We have some great board members. No one reads this stuff beforehand, and I don't want to waste our time going through these documents. So any insights would be welcome.
Sure. Okay, so hey, board members that are on the comm right now, who's doing this well right now? Whose board is actually reading their information and coming ready to party at the board meeting? If there's anyone here, let me know, because let's talk to Drew. If not, I've got some stuff for you. So I'm looking for hands. Is anyone, Mary, hit it. Mary Peterson, everyone.
Thanks, Kari. So I'm retired, but the key for me was exactly what Kari said before. It was the consent agenda and saying, we're going to go through all of this stuff and accept all of these minutes and all of these reports in one fell swoop. You have this chance to ask questions. And then we are going to move on. And what we did was dedicate half of our meeting time to discussion of those issues you were talking about, those burning strategic issues. And honestly, it made them all accountable. So I planted a couple of questions the first couple of meetings that people would ask about the stuff that had been sent out. But generally, it worked. That was what it took to get them to do their homework in advance, because they knew this was it, their one chance to ask those questions. And God bless them, they did it.
Bridget, I saw your hand up. Do you have some additional tools for Drury?
I was mostly a thumbs up, totally echoing Mary. I will say that whenever I recruit a new board member, or kind of like the start of a year, I will say I instill a little bit of the fear of God in my board of saying, you're legally liable.
Right.
When you vote, when you're approving this consent agenda, you are telling me legally that you've read this, you understand it, you agree, you support it. And that's serious. This is a huge responsibility. So, I say it lovingly, but I also have some like, you need to make sure that you know what you're talking about. And so I think that's important for us as staff supporting them and setting up our board for success, that they really understand the legal liability they're taking on by supporting our organization in this role, because it is a serious undertaking. And while it can be really fun and exciting at times, that is a part of it.
Sure. Hey, Todd, you got a question. What can we answer for you?
Just a comment. We do have on the local level, we put agendas out and I try and get them out 5 days before, but we do waste a lot of time reading the minutes, which is very frustrating. But when I took over, what helped a lot of folks understand the timeline is when I sent out the agenda, I would say from 10 until 10:15, we're doing secretarial stuff. And from 10:15 to 10:45, we're doing, so I put approximate times of how much time we're spending on things. So people know that, hey, we only have an hour to do this meeting. And unfortunately, if we don't get to it, then we got to meet again. And so it's kind of putting the fear of God, like, oh gosh, I don't want to spend another meeting time. So let's stay on task. And I'm still trying to get our board to understand that they need to read the minutes, because spending 15 minutes reading minutes that they've had in their hands for 5 days is not productive.
Right. I think really the last couple of pieces I would say with this, and Gemma will get to your question, which has an easy answer, is, it's our job when we think about, the board's role as an aggregate unit is to hire, support, and evaluate the executive director. Heavy on the support, right? I had Harley's for a long time. I had a lot of patches on my vest, and I swear I need to make a patch for all nonprofit boards that says, support your local executive director, right? Like, that's the thing. But on the flip side of it, right, as a executive director, our job is to support the board. How we support the board is this. Your board packet goes out a week in advance. People, not 5 days, right? A week. Has your financials, has your minutes, has all your reports, right? And then we are giving busy people, right, time. But if we're doing that for them, the expectation coming from the board chair, not coming from the executive director, is, people, we have given you this. You are expected to open the email. You are expected to open the documents. You are expected to come ready to party. That's the deal, right? And it's our job, board chair, executive director, right? Sometimes executive committee, we need to create an agenda that makes people want to show up, right? So please stop reading to people. Please stop reading reports, right? Please stop reading minutes. We can all do this. So, right, and if we've got, if we're working with organizations where we need to provide closed captioning, right, or information differently so everyone can participate, we got to do that, right? That's the tech piece. Gemma's question was this: what's the ideal and recommended board term? I have so many thoughts on this, but hey, who else wants to share? What's the ideal board term? I love the fact that she's asking term, not to infinity and beyond as your board term. So who is saying 2 years, 3 years, or other? Who's got what? What's the ideal board term? Anyone? It's not for life. I'm just going to tell you, 3. I think it's 3, right? 3 years, right? And the reason, and this is unsophisticated, Gemma, I'll just say that, right? So first year in as a board member, you're having to kind of learn everything, right? You don't know what you don't know, even when we're doing a good job. Second year, you really start to cook with gas. Third year, you're really making a difference. And the norm that I see is you have the opportunity to serve 2 3-year terms, right? Everyone needs to leave at some point in time. It does not mean you are not a valued human. It means we need to adhere to terms and term limits. I think that's a big deal. Everyone needs to leave. It doesn't mean that you drop off a cliff when you're a board member. You still add immense value to the organization. You're just not on the board for a while. You're taking a break. It's important. How many terms, Drew? I hope we got that right. Two terms usually. I know all of you are better people than I am. If someone was recruiting me for a board and said, you can serve up to 9 years, I want to vomit. That is not intriguing to me whatsoever, right? I want to know where I can get in, make a difference, and I want to know that I can leave and still add value to the organization, right? And I've heard a rumor on the street, y'all tell me if I'm wrong on this, we have other generations in the workforce that serving that long is not intriguing to them, right? And if we have 100 million millennials in our workforce, we need to be looking at how we can create leadership opportunities where people want to stick. It's really important. Other questions? We've got 5 more minutes. I mean, you all can peace out when you wish, right? But I've got 5 more minutes with you. What other burning questions are on the minds, chat or live, that you want to have answered with regard to the dance? I know I'm not going to sing the Garth Brooks song right now either, just as a heads up. I'm looking for hands. Anyone? I'm looking in the chat. Okay. Oh, how big is your board? Hey, Paul's asking everyone, what's the average size of boards? People, chat along. Help Paul out. Or you can do, hand signs. 7 to 9, 9, 9, 9 to 11. Sweet spot, really, Paul, probably is 9 to 11. And the reason, this is my rationale behind that. So you need to have quorum. That's a big deal, right? You've got best practice board committees, right? Executive, fund development, governance, finance are usually the 4. Sometimes there's more depending on what's going on in your organization. You need board members to chair those committees. And you know that not everyone is going to show up at each meeting. That is just a fact of life, right? But if you've got more board members, you're going to have a higher probability for engaged board meeting and quorum. And you're also going to have committee work that's getting done, because that's where the work gets done, is in board committee. So there's no reason you can't have more, because more helps to lighten the load, right? So that's the deal. Okay. All right. As I wait for any more questions, I would absolutely leave you with this. Back in the chat, some of you might have caught it, some of you might not. I put my website in there. I also put a link to a way to find me. Some of you know this, and some of you will now know this. I offer free, FREE, half-hour calls Mondays for anything that ails you, anything. It is a cone of silence. No one ever knows that you're on the call with me. You can talk about anything. There is no cap on how many of those calls you have. My only requirement, actually I have 2, is this. We do not talk about the same thing twice, because I actually want you to have done something about the thing, right? And then we can talk about something else the next time. And if you have to cancel, because I get sometimes things come up, give me 24 hours notice, because I got a backlog on those things and I don't want them wasted. I know I needed something like that when I was an executive director and when I was board chair. Like, sometimes you just got to talk something out, right? Or dance it out or do whatever. I know they're helpful because folks have told me so. But I also know that when I was y'all, I needed to have a space where I could say, so I don't know how to do this. And I'm embarrassed to ask, right? So, and Todd, I have already gotten a hold of Jill. She's going to be sending you those links. So, you all have been delightful. Thanks for hanging with me on a Friday morning. I'm so appreciative. Bridget knows this, Jill knows this. Well, Mary knows this too, because I've seen her before. Y'all are the bomb. And I am so, so happy that you are doing the work that you are doing in Montana for Montanans and making sure that the sector stays as strong as it is. I'm so appreciative for what you do. And I will look forward to hopefully seeing you in town in Montana at some point in time this spring, summer, or fall. So take good care.
Thank you,
And
Kari.
happy Friday.
Thank you everyone for joining. Hope to see you next month at the Bozeman Public Library.
Thanks, Kari.
Yes, you're welcome.
Great job.